Hi there, and welcome to another video. In this video, you're going to see how to install N8n in production. And I'm going to use Docker Compose to install N8n on a Contabo VPS. This can work with any VPS. You don't have to be using Contabo, but in this example, I'm going to use Contabo as my VPS of choice. So Contabo is one of the most affordable VPSs. They provide VPS servers with dedicated resources and shared resources, as well as dedicated servers. Let's click on Cloud VPS. Choose one. I can go with the 6 virtual CPUs and 12 GB of RAM. Click on Configure. I already have a server, but this is how you'd go about it if you needed a server from Contabo. And then configure your Cloud VPS. In this case, if you pay monthly, that is your price, $7.95 per month. If you pay annually, that is your pricing, you'll save about $20 for the year. So let's say you go with the monthly, and then you select your storage. Since it's N8n, you can just go with the 200 GB SSD, you'll get more storage. And then in my example, I'm using Ubuntu 24.04, so go with that as well. If you want to add this add-on for automatic backups, you can do so. All these other items, just leave them as they are. These ones, leave them as they are. And then enter a password. You can generate a new password here. And this password, make sure you copy it, because this is the password you're going to use to log into your server via SSH with your user for root. So make sure you save this somewhere. And then go next. Pay for your Contabo server, log into your SSH server, and then follow along. So that's the first thing. We're going to use Contabo for the VPS. If you want to use Contabo, I will add the link in the description below. I already have the post. I have written everything here, and I have grouped all the commands together to make it easier for you. That's the next thing. The article is there. I'm going to add the link for this in the description as well. The next item we're going to use is Cloudflare. As I said, we're installing N8n in production. And so you're definitely going to need a domain name to make that happen. So that's what this is about. So add your domain to Cloudflare, come here under DNS, click on records, and we're going to add the DNS records. So let's get started. And the first thing I want to do is to add my DNS records. So go to Cloudflare, add your domain, come here under records, add your DNS. So I already have my Contabo server. So let me just go to my Contabo server. I will get my IP from there, copy, and then come back to Cloudflare, and the domain that I want to use for my N8n is under that. So I can add a subdomain. You're going to see where we are going to configure this. So make sure you add it as a subdomain, or you can use a full domain, but usually most people use subdomains. So in this case, I'm just going to add an A record with my IP, and the subdomain I want to use is net. Just say net, and then I will add the IP address. And for now, let me just leave it proxied. I will see if there is any problem as a result of proxying my DNS. I'm going to unproxy it, but for now, I'm just going to leave it proxied through the Cloudflare network, and then I'll save. Guess what? That's all you need for your DNS. The bare minimum you need for your DNS. If you have an IPv6 record as well, you can come here and add your IPv6 for the same, right? But I don't have one, so I'm just going to leave that as it is. First step is done, right? Which is like third step in our post. It's like third step, adding the DNS record. But for me, the first step is done. Our DNS record has been added. Now let's go log into our server, and then update what we need to update, and then install Docker and continue from there. Once you get your server, you've gotten your IP, log in to your Contabo server. So I'm going to SSH root. Yes, this is the first time I'm logging in, and my password This is a password that I set for my server. Paste. There we go. You've now logged into the server. Let's continue with the next step. So I can see up here, it says that a system restart is required, and I can come back, see what I'm supposed to do next. So let me first of all update. So you can run this entire thing in one go, and it's going to do everything that you need, right? But the only reason I want to do this is because I can update it before I restart it. All right, so it seems like Contabo did all the upgrades during the installation. So let's just restart the server. I'll just do reboot. Control L to clear the screen. So I didn't mention this in the beginning, but if you've watched my videos before, I always say it. If you're on Windows and you want to follow along, download Git and then open Git Bash, and you'll be able to type all the commands I'm typing without making any changes. Git, open, Git Bash. Let's log in. Control Shift V to paste in my password. There we go. I'm logged in. Control L to clear the screen. And as I was saying, you can copy and run all this. So the first one updates the server. The second one is just going to install these applications, probably already installed on Ubuntu. Then we're going to create a new sudo user because I don't want to run Docker with my root user. And that there will create the user. Give the user any name that you prefer, a unique name, and then add the user to the sudo as group. So you can use sudo to manage the server with that user. And then we're going to switch to that user. So I can run this in one command like that. Of course, it's going to ask me to enter details for that user, and we're going to do that. So Control Shift V, enter. All right, so just keep your eye out. You need to enter a password for the user that you're creating. And I can use that as my password. Copy. Control Shift V to paste, enter. Control Shift V to paste, enter. The rest of these details for my user, I can just press enter to skip. Enter, 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 enter. Yes, there we go. The user has been created, and as you can see, we've now switched to that user. So the first thing you can test is to make sure if you can actually use sudo with this user. So I'm going to do sudo apt update. Enter the password for the user. Control Shift V to paste, or Shift Insert to paste if you're following along on Git Bash. There we go, we can use sudo. If you don't want to give them sudo privileges, that's something else that you can decide. It's on you to decide. But that means you'd have to use the root user to manage the server. So update, that is done. And then the next step is to install Docker. So Docker, as of version 29, supports nftables experimentally. So this is a feature that lots of people wanted, and I am happy to use this feature. So for that reason, I'm going to uninstall UFW and firewall D in case they are there, and I know only UFW is there. And then we're going to enable nftables. We'll use nftables as our firewall, and then after that, I'm going to edit the nftables configuration file and add these rules there. So copy, Control L to clear the screen, Control Shift V. I'm going to paste everything. So remove UFW, enable nftables, and edit the nftables configuration file. Enter. Let's come back. I want to copy all this. You can use the same rules. If you know how to use nftables, you can use the same rules. If you want to change any rule, you can do so here. If you want to allow any port, you can allow a port within there, or you can add your own rules. So that is like my custom SSH port that I will change to later. So that's why I've added it in there. But you can change it to whatever. You can remove any port you don't need. Any port you need, you can add it there. just comma port like that. And then I'm going to copy that, come back, and this is a file, the configuration file. So let me just delete everything and paste everything that I've copied. So I'm just going to do maybe 100 dd. That's like saying delete the next 100 lines in Vim. Control Shift V to paste. Confirm that you've added everything. Escape. So even before I escape and save this, if you come down here, as I was saying, if you want to add any port, you can add it. You can add the port. After that, go into insert mode, press I, comma, add the port you want to add. Maybe you want to add port 80, you can do so. Or if you don't want to add it there, escape, you can copy this line and add it below. So let's say, for example, that's what I want to do. YYP to copy the line, and then you can add whichever port you want to add inside here. 80, or rather, first of all, go into insert mode, press I, 80, right? If you want to add more ports, you can do so there. 80, 90, right? So if you want to add more ports, you can do that. And by doing this, you're going to make it so that Docker doesn't pass through your firewall. So only the ports you allow will be allowed through your network, and they will not be accessible publicly. So escape, and then I'm just going to delete this line. I don't need it. DD to delete that line. Escape, Shift ZZ to save. And then after doing that, I need to restart nftables. Restart nftables. Control L, Control Shift V to paste, Shift Insert to paste on git bash. So the next step, let's just confirm our rules, our firewall rules. Use sudo. I forgot to add sudo. All right, so there are our rules, and these are the ports that are currently allowed on our network. So Control L. Let's continue on. We've set up our firewall. Now the next step, let's install Docker. I've added all the commands here to save me time. I like to do this because it saves me a lot of time if I want to do something. So in this case, it's going to add the repository for Docker. Add the repository for Docker. It's going to add the stable version, the stable repository, and then we're going to install Docker and Docker Compose and build. And then we're going to enable Docker with nftables. So if you want to enable Docker with nftables, you need to start it by letting Docker know that the firewall backend will be nftables. And then we're going to restart Docker. Once you do this, restart Docker so that it can generate the nftables rules that is needed for Docker to run. And then we want to make sure that the user that you've created doesn't need to use sudo to run Docker. Sudo docker run, sudo docker build. We don't want that. We want the user to use it without using sudo. So we're going to add the current user to the Docker group, right? So this creates the group. The group already exists. Usually when you install Docker, the group will have been created. And then this is the one that is going to modify the user by adding the user to this Docker group. If you're currently running this as the root user, just enter the username that you want to use there, right? The username that you want to add to the Docker group. And then eventually you can decide if you want to log out and log back in, or if you don't want to do that, you can just run this and it's going to reload the shell with the user that is needed for the current user, with the groups that is needed for the current user. And then we're going to run that to confirm if Docker has been installed successfully. If this runs successfully, then well and good, everything is working fine. So I'm just going to copy everything. I want to run it in one go. There's nothing here that I need to edit, so I can just run it in one go. Control Shift V to paste, enter. If we face any problems, don't worry, we'll fix them as we go on. You can see we're installing Docker 2901. Okay. All right, so it seems like group already exists. So something didn't run, but we know where it stopped. We know where it stopped. So so based on what I've just run, it seems like I need to run this in a different. I'll separate this in its own command, because when that ran, it just instantly did not run the next command. So let's just confirm if the groups have been changed, right? So I'm going to just type group. Let me Control L to clear the screen. And the next thing, I just want to confirm if the current user has been added to the Docker group. I mean groups, not group, groups. All right, so you can see the new user is in the Docker group as we need it to be. So the next thing, let's copy that, and I want to confirm that we can actually run things on Docker. Perfect. Everything is running as needed, and we didn't need to use sudo for this. So step 2, set up DNS on Cloudflare. That's the first thing we did. Add your DNS records on Cloudflare. Step 3, create a project file, files directory, and env file. So let's explain this one step at a time. We're going to create the project directory. This is where we're going to have our Docker compose file, and then we're going to switch to that directory. You can call it whatever you want. You don't have to call it N8n project. You can call it whatever you prefer. And once we cd into that directory, we're going to create a directory called local files. So local files is just a local volume that will have shareable files between our host and the Docker container. And once we do that, we're going to create an env file, and inside of that env, we're going to add this. Okay, so don't copy everything in here, because this is different, but this is just an env that lets your Docker compose have the domain that you want to use and its subdomain. So in our situation, we're going to need to edit that and edit that. So enter the domain that you want to use there and the subdomain. In the end, it will be combined together to form netin.bizenosa.com, or whichever domain you want to use. We are going to edit this, and then the time zone, wherever you are, just enter your time zone, and then the SSL email. Right, so let's copy from here. I want to run it in one go. Create the folder, go into the folder, create the local directory, create the local volume, and then create the env file. I'm going to copy that up to there. Come here, Control L to clear the screen, Control Shift V, and note that when I'm creating all these items, I'm not using sudo. All right, I'm doing them as this user without using sudo. So let's add the configurations that you need to edit here. So make sure you edit everything here appropriately. They're pretty well commented, and this is based on the documentation. I think the link is somewhere there. The link is here, so just click and see what the original documentation had. Paste, and for us, we want to change the domain. So my main domain is called, press I to go into insert mode, and my subdomain is net. So in the end, we are going to access N8n via net.agulmi.com. Time zone, enter your time zone there, and then for the email, just enter an email that will be used to issue your certificate. Gmail. Confirm the domain, confirm the subdomain, escape, shift ZZ. You can see now we're inside of that directory. Right, the final step, Docker Compose. The Docker Compose file is here. First, we'll create the file and then we'll add the Compose services. Everything is here, just look at it. This is based on the documentation. If you click there, you're going to see it's 98% the same with what you have on the documentation. If you need to change anything here, you can always do so. The only thing I added was the rate limit, nothing else, just that. So I will copy the Compose file, copy, Control Shift V, or rather create the Compose file, and then I will add all the services. Copy, Control Shift V, ensure everything is copied. There you go. Escape, Shift ZZ, and now you're ready to run your Docker Compose. So Docker Compose app -d. Let it run, download what it needs, and then eventually we're going to test and see if it is accessible. And that's pretty much it. All right, so let's see our containers. Docker PS. Containers are running, and we can go and check. We can go and check if everything is all right on the front end. So let's come here, and I will go to the domain net.agolmi.com. Connection timed out. Don't worry, we're going to fix this. Let's see what Docker is telling us. Docker logs for, let's look at the traffic container, because that's the one that's responsible for taking things to the front end. So 9E. Unable to obtain Acme certificate for the domain, cannot get Acme direct. All right, so this is probably due to DNS, and I can fix this by going to Cloudflare. This is probably due to the proxy on Cloudflare. I'm not sure, but let's just see. Sometimes it gives problems. So let's come here, and I'm going to edit this and disable proxy, save. Okay, let's run it again, but at least the issue is just SSL. But that is not a big deal. It's going to fix itself. Let's just Docker Compose up. Or rather, let me bring Docker Compose down. And then Docker Compose up again. Come back, refresh. Okay, let me check. Let me see. Control L. Having problems is a good thing. It helps you to fix whatever the issue is, especially if you don't know how to do something yourself for the first time. So Docker logs. Let's look at the traffic logs. 785. 785. That is the container ID, and the issue is still that. How about this other one? Does this other one have any problems? 10. That is the container ID. Error fetching that. Control L. Let's look at let me look at my firewall. Sudo nft list rule set. Okay, the Docker rules are there. How about my rules? Docker compose down. Compose up. Let's do this. Let's restart. Sudo systemctl restart nftables restart docker. Okay, so you see after restarting Docker and nftables, it seems to be working. So it's important that you restart both of them, because if you only restart nftables, you're going to lose the Docker rules. Let's do that in real practice. Control L, Docker restart nftables. Now if you look at the rule sets, let me search for the rule sets. Control R to search rule, enter. All right, you see, if you only restart nftables, you're going to lose the Docker rules. So make sure you restart Docker as well. Restart Docker. And if you look at the rule sets, you'll see the Docker rules are back. So the configuration is right. There's nothing I've changed in the configuration. And this is because I've just restarted them, but if we reload, it should be working again. So believe me, these are problems that are probably happening because of using nftables, but it's just much safer. If you want to see how much safer it is, right now, if you didn't follow this guide and you decided to use Docker with IP tables, this is what you can expect. Let me show you. Docker PS. So what is our port? Our port for the N8n container is that, right? 5678. All right. So if you are not using nftables, by default, this is what you'd expect. You'd be able to access your workloads using that port as well. So that's why I prefer to use nftables now that it supports it. So okay, don't worry about this. This one will not bring anything. This will not bring anything. It just gives you 404. But if you add the port to the container, you'll never be able to access it. Never be able to access it. You can't access it unless you allow that port in your firewall. Unless you add that port somewhere there, then maybe you'd be able to access it, right? But if you're using IP tables, I can assure you there's a chance if you visit this link with your public IP, you will see something there. In this case, you can't because the port is not allowed in our nftables. There you go. You can now set up your account. You just try again and you're going to see you can add your details. Skip. So once you install it successfully, you also need to secure your server. So make sure you follow some of the initial server setup tutorial. I'll add this link in the description. So here you can do things like changing your SSH port. You've already set up the firewall. You can set up an SSH key to log in. You can disable the root user from logging in and set up and also disable password authentication after setting up SSH key login for the user you created. Anyway, in this video, you've seen how to install N8n. Where is it? You've seen how to install N8n with Docker Compose on Contabo, and this is production ready. Just make sure you do the security settings like changing your SSH port, disabling the root user, and you have a fully production ready N8n server. That's it for this one. If you have any question, feel free to let me know. I will see you next time.